Most people think offense comes from words. They think anger is caused by disrespect. They believe irritation is something done to them. That belief is the first mistake. Because the truth is colder than that. Nothing outside of you has the power to offend you unless something inside of you is asking to be touched. Watch carefully. Two people hear the same insult. One explodes. One doesn't react at all. The words were identical. The difference was not strength. It was attachment. Offense is not an emotion. It is a signal. A signal that something in you still needs validation, control, recognition, or safety. When someone offends you, what they've really done is reveal a pressure point. They've discovered where your identity is still exposed. This is why emotionally powerful people rarely raise their voices. Not because they are kinder, not because they are calmer, but because there is nothing left for the world to grab. Most minds walk through life with hooks sticking out of them. Opinions, self-images, wounds, roles, expectations. And the world, unconsciously, keeps pulling. Once you see this mechanism, anger becomes almost embarrassing. Not because it's wrong, but because it's predictable. This video is not about being polite. It's not about suppressing emotion. And it's definitely not about letting things go. This is about something far more dangerous. Becoming unreachable. Because when nothing can offend you, nothing can control you. And when nothing can control you, you move differently. You speak less. You observe more. You stop reacting and start choosing. Most people never reach this point. Not because it's difficult, but because it requires giving up a familiar addiction. The addiction to being right, to being seen, to being emotionally fed by conflict. If that makes you uncomfortable, good. That means you're still paying attention. Before we go further, don't rush this. If you're here for noise, motivation, or advice, this won't satisfy you. But if you're here to understand why some minds remain untouched while others burn, then stay. Subscribe quietly. Not as a signal to me, but as a signal to yourself. And now, let's begin at the root. Offense does not happen automatically. That is the first illusion to break. What most people call being offended is not a reflex like blinking or breathing. It is a transaction. A silent agreement made in a fraction of a second between your mind and an external stimulus. Someone speaks, someone looks, someone ignores. And inside you, something decides, this matters. That decision is the contract. Without it, nothing enters. And mind is always negotiating meaning. It listens to the world and constantly asks one question. Does this threaten who I think I am? If the answer is no, the moment passes unnoticed. If the answer is yes, the body reacts before language even forms. Muscles tighten, breath shortens, heat rises. Only afterward does the story arrive. That was disrespectful. They crossed a line. I shouldn't be treated this way. But the story is not the cause. It is the justification. This is why offense feels personal, even when it isn't. The external event is rarely precise enough to target you exactly. Most people speak from their own chaos, fear, and conditioning. Yet the mind hears intent where there may be none. It translates ambiguity into threat, because threat confirms an existing identity. If you believe you are someone who must be respected, the mind will scan relentlessly for disrespect. If you believe you are overlooked, it will collect evidence of neglect. The world becomes a mirror that only reflects what you are prepared to see. Carl Jung described this mechanism through projection. Whatever we cannot tolerate consciously, we encounter unconsciously in others. Offense is often a projection colliding with a stimulus. The words hit not because they are sharp, but because they land on something already exposed. This is why strangers can offend us more deeply than people who know us well. Strangers trigger archetypes, not facts. They touch the wound without knowing where it is. The psychological contract of offense has 3 clauses. First, identification. You must be identified with an image of yourself. Intelligent, good, strong, moral, unbreakable. Second, expectation. The world must be expected to confirm this image. Respect me, see me, treat me correctly. Third, interpretation. When reality deviates, the deviation is interpreted as an attack. Only when all 3 clauses are present does offense occur. Remove one, and the contract collapses. Most people believe their identity protects them. In reality, it makes them fragile. The stronger the attachment to a self-image, the easier it is to disturb. This is why confident-seeming people often react the fastest. Their confidence is not depth. It is armor. And armor is heavy. It requires constant maintenance. Any challenge feels like corrosion. Notice how offense is always followed by a desire to respond, to correct, to defend, to punish. This is not about justice. It is about restoring internal equilibrium. The ego feels destabilized and seeks to regain balance through external action. Anger is energy mobilized for repair of the self-image. Silence feels intolerable because silence does not fix the narrative. Reaction does. This is why being offended is addictive. It gives purpose. It creates movement. It allows the ego to feel alive and righteous. Calm observation feels empty by comparison. It offers no reward to the identity, no story, no drama, no proof that you matter. The mind would rather suffer loudly than dissolve quietly. But here is the uncomfortable truth. Every time you are offended, you give the other person authorship over your inner state. You hand them a pen and allow them to write your emotional weather. They may never know they were given this power, but your body knows. Your nervous system knows. It reacts as if under command. This is why power is never loud. Power does not need to correct the world because it is not negotiating its existence. When nothing is at stake internally, nothing needs to be defended externally. Words become sounds. Opinions become weather. Disrespect becomes noise. The mind remains seated. Most people confuse this with suppression. They imagine swallowing anger, forcing calm, pretending not to care. That is not power. That is tension delayed. Suppression still honors the contract. It simply refuses to act on it. True freedom comes from refusing to sign in the first place. To refuse, you must see the mechanism clearly. You must notice the moment identification arises, the moment expectation forms, the moment interpretation hardens. This requires presence, not effort. Awareness dissolves the contract before it becomes binding. Once seen, it cannot operate in the same way again. This is why insight feels destabilizing at first. Anger once provided clarity and direction. Without it, the mind feels exposed. It asks, if I am not offended, who am I? That question frightens the ego. But beyond it lies something quieter and far more stable. When offense disappears, dignity does not vanish. It becomes internal. You no longer require behavior from others to confirm your worth. You no longer outsource your emotional authority. You stop bleeding from invisible hooks. And that is when something shifts. You begin to notice how often people try to provoke, not because they are powerful, but because they are desperate to feel impact. When they fail, they grow confused. Silence unsettles them. Calm disarms them. Non-reaction reflects their own noise back to them. This is the hidden advantage. Not moral superiority, not detachment as performance, but structural independence. The mind becomes self-contained, unleverageable. Offense was never about them. It was about the contract you didn't know you were signing. Once the contract of offense is signed, the ego demands payment. That payment is reaction. Silence feels like loss. Stillness feels like defeat. The ego survives through movement. and reaction is its most reliable fuel. This is why people say they want peace, yet repeatedly choose situations that disturb them. Calm stars the ego. Conflict feeds it. Anger is not merely an emotion. It is a stimulant. It sharpens focus, narrows perception, and creates a false sense of power. In anger, the mind feels decisive, alive, justified. It no longer doubts. It no longer hesitates. The world becomes simple, enemy and self. This simplicity is intoxicating. It replaces uncertainty with direction. Many people unconsciously rely on anger to feel real. This is why minor slights provoke disproportionate reactions. The trigger is small, but the reward is large. A raised voice, a dismissive glance, a careless comment can ignite hours of internal dialogue. The mind replays scenes, imagines comebacks, constructs moral victories. None of this is about resolution. It is about stimulation. The ego needs something to chew on. Carl Jung warned that what is unconscious controls us. The person who believes they can't help getting angry is already under its control. The reaction happens before thought, yet it feels justified afterward. This illusion of justification is crucial. Without it, the ego would see its own dependency. So it reframes the reaction as principle. Anyone would be angry. They deserved it. I had to respond. These are not explanations. They are sedatives. Observe how anger always points outward. Someone else caused this. Someone else crossed a line. Someone else needs to change. This externalization protects the ego from seeing its own fragility. To admit this disturbed me because something inside me is unstable feels like annihilation. Blame is safer than awareness. The body reinforces this loop. Anger releases adrenaline and cortisol. The heart rate increases. Muscles prepare for action. The nervous system enters a familiar state. Familiarity is comforting, even when it is destructive. The body learns anger like a habit. Over time, calm begins to feel strange, bored, empty. People then provoke situations unconsciously, just to feel normal again. This is why some individuals seem permanently offended. They are not sensitive. They are dependent. They need friction to feel grounded. Without resistance, they feel weightless. So they argue, they correct. They interpret neutrality as insult. The world becomes a training ground for their nervous system's addiction. Reaction also provides identity. I am someone who stands up for myself. I don't let people disrespect me. I speak my mind. These identities feel strong, but they are reactive by nature. They require constant opposition to exist. Without an enemy, they collapse. True strength does not require resistance to validate itself. Notice how reaction always demands speed. Immediate response. Quick comeback. Instant defense. Slowness feels dangerous because it creates space. And in space, awareness enters. Awareness questions the necessity of reaction. It asks, what exactly is being threatened? The ego hates this question, so it rushes you forward before you can ask it. Silence is powerful because it interrupts this addiction. When you do not react, the expected chemical reward does not arrive. The ego experiences withdrawal, restlessness, irritation, the urge to explain yourself, to clarify, to be understood. These urges are not truth. They are symptoms. At first, non-reaction feels like weakness because the ego equates action with power. But observe carefully. When you do not react, the other person often escalates. Louder words, sharper tone, repetition. Why? Because they were counting on your reaction to complete their own loop. When it doesn't come, their ego panics. You have removed the mirror they needed. This is where quiet power emerges, not as dominance, but as gravity. You become still, and others orbit or drift away. Your nervous system stops dancing to external rhythms. You choose when and how to move. This does not mean you never speak. It means speech is no longer compulsive. It arises from clarity, not irritation. From intention, not defense. You stop trying to win emotional exchanges because you are no longer playing that game. The ego will protest. It will warn you that people will walk over you. That silence equals permission. That calm equals surrender. This is fear speaking, not wisdom. In reality, people sense boundaries more clearly when they are not wrapped in emotion. A calm no is stronger than an angry lecture. A measured response carries more weight than an explosive one. Anger leaks power. It reveals where you can be controlled. Anyone who knows how to offend you can lead you. This is why manipulators provoke. They do not need force when they have access to your reactions. The moment you react, you follow. Freedom begins when you see anger not as a moral signal, but as an internal event. A surge of energy asking to be noticed, not obeyed. You do not suppress it. You observe it. You let it rise and fall without attaching a story. This breaks the addiction. Over time, something changes. Situations that once triggered you lose their charge. Not because you are numb, but because there is nothing left to defend. The ego loosens its grip. Identity becomes lighter. You respond when needed and remain silent when not. This is not indifference. It is sovereignty. The ability to remain unmoved unless movement is chosen. The ego wants reaction. Power chooses response. Most people believe reacting gives them control. They feel that if they answer immediately, defend quickly, correct forcefully, they are asserting dominance over the situation. In reality, reaction is surrender disguised as strength. The moment something external dictates your internal state, control has already been lost. You are no longer acting. You are being acted upon. True control is quiet because it does not need to announce itself. It is not loud, sharp, or urgent. It does not rush to prove anything. It waits. This waiting is not hesitation. It is authority gathering itself. The illusion begins early. As children, we learn that emotional displays bring results. Crying brings attention. Anger brings compliance. Defensiveness brings justification. Over time, these strategies harden into reflexes. By adulthood, most people are not choosing their responses. They are replaying learned scripts. The mind believes it is deciding, but the body is remembering. This is why the same patterns repeat, the same arguments, the same triggers, the same regrets. People promise themselves they will respond differently next time, yet find themselves reacting in identical ways. They blame circumstances, other people, stress. Rarely do they question the assumption that reaction equals control. Carl Jung observed that what we do not make conscious will direct our lives, and we will call it fate. Reaction lives in this unconscious space. It feels inevitable, automatic, necessary. But inevitability is often just unexamined habit. When you pause instead of reacting, something uncomfortable appears. Uncertainty. A brief void where the old script fails to load. This is the moment most people avoid. They rush to fill the silence with words, emotions, explanations. But this void is not emptiness. It is possibility. In that pause, you begin to sense the difference between impulse and intention. Impulse is loud and impatient. It demands expression. Intention is quiet and patient. It waits for alignment. The more you practice pausing, the clearer this difference becomes. Inner authority is born here, not from dominating others, but from no longer being dominated by internal chaos. When your emotions no longer drag you forward, you begin to move with precision. You speak less, but each word lands heavier. You act less, but each action carries weight. This shift confuses people. They are used to predictable reactions. They know which buttons to press. When those buttons stop working, they feel disoriented. Some will escalate, Others will withdraw. A few will adjust. This is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is coherence. Coherence is alignment between thought, emotion, and action. Reaction fractures this alignment. It creates inner contradiction. You say things you do not mean. You do things you later regret. Inner authority restores alignment. Even silence becomes an action when it is chosen consciously. Notice how people with true authority rarely explain themselves. They do not narrate their decisions. They do not seek validation. They do not argue endlessly. Their presence sets a tone. Others feel it before they understand it. This is not charisma. It is containment. Containment is the capacity to hold emotional energy without leaking it outward. Most people leak constantly. Through complaints, through sarcasm, through defensiveness, through anger. They relieve pressure by dispersing it. Contained individuals do the opposite. They allow energy to settle. This gives them density. Density creates gravity. Gravity influences without force. It pulls rather than pushes. When you stop reacting, you become dense. People feel your steadiness. Conversations slow around you. Chaos softens, or reveals itself more clearly. This is why nothing can offend you once you see this. Offense requires participation. It requires you to internalize someone else's words as a verdict on your worth. Inner authority dissolves this mechanism. Words become information, not identity. This does not mean you tolerate disrespect. It means you respond from clarity rather than injury. Injury demands retaliation. Clarity demands correction or exit. Sometimes the strongest response is withdrawal. Sometimes it is a single sentence spoken calmly. Sometimes it is silence that communicates finality. The mind fears this approach because it feels exposed without reaction. Reaction is armor. Loud, spiked, obvious. Inner authority wears no armor. It trusts its structure. This trust is built slowly, through repeated moments of restraint. Each time you pause instead of reacting, you reclaim a fragment of yourself. Each time you choose response over impulse, you strengthen internal leadership. Over time, emotional storms still arise, but they no longer seize the wheel. You observe them pass. People mistake this for coldness. It is not cold. It is warm and stable, like deep water. The surface may ripple, but the depths remain still. This depth is what others sense. It is why calm unsettles those who depend on chaos. The ultimate irony is this: the less you try to control others through reaction, the more influence you gain. Not because you manipulate, but because you are no longer predictable. Predictability is the enemy of power. Awareness breaks predictability. You begin to live from center rather than edge, from choice rather than compulsion, from authority rather than defense. Nothing offends you because nothing owns you, and what does not own you cannot move you. This is the quiet shift that changes everything. There comes a moment when you realize that anger was never your enemy, nor was offense, irritation, or emotional pain. The true enemy was unconscious identification. You believed your reactions were you. You mistook inner noise for truth. Once this illusion collapses, something irreversible begins. Freedom does not arrive as euphoria. It arrives as stillness. A quiet, unfamiliar absence of internal argument. You notice situations that once hijacked your nervous system now pass without leaving a mark. Not because you became numb, but because nothing inside you rushed forward to be wounded. Most people live as if their mind is an open city with no gates. Any word can enter. Any opinion can occupy space. Any insult can claim residence. Emotional freedom begins when the gates are built. Not walls of hostility, but boundaries of awareness. Jung believed individuation was the task of a lifetime. It is the process of becoming whole rather than fragmented. Reaction fragments you. One part feels attacked. Another seeks defense. Another plans retaliation. You are divided against yourself. Inner freedom unifies these parts under a single authority. This authority is not ego. Ego reacts to protect its image. Authority observes to protect its integrity. Ego needs to win. Authority needs to remain aligned. When alignment becomes the priority, conflict loses its fuel. Notice how often anger comes from expectation. You expected respect, agreement, recognition, fairness. When reality deviates, frustration arises. But expectations are contracts you never showed the other person. You punished them for violating rules they never agreed to. Freedom comes when expectations dissolve into preferences. You may prefer respect, but you no longer demand it from the unprepared. You may value understanding, but you no longer chase it from the unwilling. This shift removes resentment at its root. The offended mind is addicted to moral superiority. It feeds on the belief that it is right and the other is wrong. This belief feels powerful, but it is fragile. It collapses the moment validation disappears. Inner freedom does not require anyone to be wrong for you to be at peace. This does not mean passivity. It means precision. You choose when engagement serves growth and when silence preserves energy. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop arguing with those who feed on reaction. A strange thing happens when you stop reacting. Life tests you harder. Old triggers return wearing new faces. This is not punishment. It is calibration. Your nervous system is being retrained. Each successful moment of restraint rewires it towards stability. Eventually, calm becomes your default. Not forced calm, but natural composure. You no longer rehearse arguments in your head. You no longer relive conversations. The mind grows quieter because it is no longer preparing for war. This quiet creates space. In that space, clarity appears. You see patterns faster. You detect manipulation earlier. You sense when a situation is draining before it damages you. Awareness replaces vigilance. People will notice the change. Some will respect it. Others will resent it. Those who depended on your reactions to feel powerful will feel threatened. Let them. Your evolution is not a negotiation. The final illusion to dissolve is the belief that being unbothered means being detached from life. In truth, it is the opposite. You become more present, not less. When emotional noise fades, perception sharpens. You hear what is actually said. You see what is actually happening. This presence brings a deeper form of compassion. Not the sentimental kind, but the grounded kind. You understand that most cruelty is unconscious pain seeking relief. You no longer take it personally. You respond from strength or walk away without bitterness. Anger no longer defines you. It becomes a signal, not a command. You listen, assess, and decide. The same is true for offense. It informs you about values and boundaries, but it no longer dictates behavior. This is the end of inner slavery. No longer ruled by mood, no longer hostage to opinion, no longer reactive to provocation. You stand in psychological sovereignty. Nothing can offend you once you see this, because offense requires identification. You have disidentified from the noise. You are no longer the emotion. You are the awareness witnessing it. And awareness cannot be attacked. This is not a technique. It is a way of being, built slowly, earned through restraint, strengthened through silence, protected through clarity. The world remains loud. People remain unconscious. But you move through it untouched, not because you are superior, but because you are awake. That is real power. If this stayed with you, don't rush away. Sit with it. Let the silence do its work. Subscribe only if you're ready to build strength that doesn't react, clarity that doesn't argue, and a mind that no longer asks the world for permission to be at peace. We don't chase noise here. We cultivate quiet power.